Hey everybody, Trevor here. Today we're diving into a topic that's been on everyone's minds lately. So you want to talk about the police? It's a subject that stirs up a lot of emotions and opinions. It's a big topic, right? Especially here in America, where the role and actions of the police are constantly under scrutiny. We're supposed to be the land of the free, but sometimes it feels like we're living in a police state. The presence of law enforcement is felt everywhere and not always in a comforting way. The question of whether American police are occupiers or protectors is a complex one, with valid arguments on both sides. While police are generally tasked with protecting communities and upholding the law, the militarization of policing and the use of military tactics have raised concerns about their role and impact, particularly in marginalized communities. Some argue that this militarization has led to a war-on-crime mentality, where police are seen as an occupying force rather than a community partner. Now, I'm not saying all cops are bad, but this system, it's got some serious issues. From systemic racism to excessive use of force, there are deep-rooted problems that need addressing. In the Dutch era from 1625 to 1664, the first professional police department was created in New Amsterdam, with most of all its members being a part of the clan. New Amsterdam is what it was called before New York. When they first started, police officers used hand rattles as they patrolled the streets to discourage crime and apprehend criminals. Under British rule from 1664 to 1783, constables were charged with keeping the peace. Ever since 1625, the police has been working under the British Crown until this very day. The first police were to patrol the so-called slaves. Keep in mind, the Nubians in America were natives and never slaves. They became prisoners of war. This is why they created so many prisons. Immigrants who commit crimes in the U.S. are deported for several reasons, primarily due to federal immigration laws that consider criminal convictions as grounds for removal. These laws prioritize the enforcement of immigration rules, often leading to deportation for individuals with a criminal history, even if they have been lawfully admitted. Being convicted of a crime, whether a felony or a misdemeanor, can trigger deportation proceedings. Certain crimes, such as aggravated felonies, serious crimes like drug trafficking or murder, and crimes involving moral turpitude, crimes that involve dishonesty or harm to others like fraud, theft, or domestic violence, are particularly likely to lead to deportation. Why don't they deport you for the crimes you commit, so-called black man, if you're from Africa? Instead, they just created more prisons, which are privately owned. In the United States, private prisons are operated by for-profit companies under contract with the government, typically state or federal. These prisons are funded through government contracts, often based on the number of inmates housed or the number of available beds. While the goal is often cost savings for the government, the effectiveness and ethical implications of private prisons are subjects of ongoing debate. Private prisons are owned and operated by private companies, unlike public prisons, which are owned and operated by government entities. Private prisons are funded through government contracts, which typically involve paying a per diem or monthly rate for each inmate. Private prison companies operate as for-profit businesses, seeking to maximize profits through contracts with the government. While proponents argue that private prisons can save money for taxpayers, studies have shown that their costs can be comparable to or even higher than public prisons. Concerns have been raised about the safety and security in private prisons, including reports of escapes, riots, and higher rates of inmate-on-guard violence. Some critics argue that private prisons can incentivize higher incarceration rates due to their incentive to keep facilities at full occupancy. There are concerns about potential corruption in private prisons, as companies may prioritize profits over the well-being and safety of inmates. Some argue that private prisons lack the same level of accountability and oversight as public prisons, as government oversight may be less rigorous. Critics argue that private prisons do not always result in cost savings, and that some studies show that their costs can be comparable to or even higher than public prisons. There are concerns about the safety and security in private prisons, including reports of escapes, riots, and higher rates of inmate-on-guard violence. They started wearing uniforms because of uniform code. A uniform code is a set of regulations or laws that are designed to be the same or consistent across different jurisdictions, such as states or countries. This ensures that the rules are applied in a uniform manner, making it easier for businesses and individuals to navigate different legal systems. This is a model law that governs commercial transactions in the United States. It has been adopted by all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and the territories. The UCC aims to create a standardized framework for various aspects of business, like sales, leasing, and banking, ensuring consistency across the country. This refers to a legal system where laws governing personal matters like marriage, divorce, inheritance, and property are the same for all citizens regardless of their religion or community. This refers to a family of codes related to building regulations, including plumbing, mechanical, and solar energy, which are used in various jurisdictions to ensure safety and efficiency. This is the set of laws governing the conduct and legal procedures of the U.S. military justice system. This is a manual used in California state government to define standard codes and structures for financial and accounting data. Let's rewind a bit. Early American policing was a mixed bag. It wasn't always about badges and uniforms. Some towns had watchmen, like a colonial neighborhood watch. These were ordinary citizens who took turns keeping an eye on things. Think dudes with lanterns. Not exactly RoboCop, they were more about community safety than enforcing laws. But, and this is important, the seeds of militarization were sown early on. Remember the American Revolution? The need for organized defense started to shape how communities thought about security. Yeah, after gaining independence, many cities modeled their police forces after the military. Why? Because the occupying foreign military became the police. This wasn't just about having a structured force, it was about instilling discipline and order. Discipline, hierarchy, you know the drill. The police were trained to follow orders, policies, and maintain a chain of command, much like soldiers. This military influence wasn't just about structure, it was about mindset and control. The idea was to create a force that could handle any situation with authority and control. The police weren't just there to keep the peace. They were seen as a force to maintain order, often with force. This approach sometimes led to tensions within the communities they were supposed to protect. And who did they see as threats to this order? Often it was marginalized groups, so-called black people, and anyone who didn't fit the mold of the ideal first-class citizen, who were so-called white immigrants. Some dark-skinned people from other countries had white on their passport. Why do dark-skinned people have white on their passport is likely asking why some people of color, particularly those of African descent, might be identified as white on official documents like passports or in other contexts. This can happen due to historical biases in racial classification, the concept of passing, and the fluidity of how people identify themselves and are perceived by others. In the United States, particularly during the antebellum period and beyond, there was a strong incentive for some people of color to pass as white, meaning to present themselves as white in order to gain access to privileges and opportunities that were denied to so-called black people. This was a way to escape slavery, avoid discrimination, and gain a higher social standing. The concept of passing refers to the ability of individuals, often with mixed-race ancestry, to appear white enough to be accepted as such. This could involve consciously altering their appearance or behavior to blend in with white society. Perception and self-identification. People's racial identity is often shaped by how they perceive themselves and how they are perceived by others. In some cases, individuals who have mixed-race ancestry may be perceived as white by others, even if they identify as a different race. This can lead to discrepancies in how people identify themselves versus how they are categorized by official institutions. Cultural and social factors. Racial classifications are not always clear-cut, and cultural and social factors can play a role in how individuals are perceived and categorized. For example, some people who have an Arab background may be classified as white in the U.S. Census, despite having distinct ethnic and cultural ties to other regions. In summary, the phenomenon of individuals being identified as white despite their dark skin can be attributed to a combination of historical biases, the concept of passing, and the fluidity of racial identity and perception. It's a complex issue with deep roots in history and ongoing relevance in social and cultural contexts. Well, that brings us to a dark chapter in American history. The relationship between the police and the communities they serve has been fraught with conflict and mistrust. From the civil rights movement to the present day, the struggle for justice and equality continues. During the civil rights movement, for example, the police were often seen as enforcers of segregation and oppression. Images of police brutality against peaceful protesters are etched into the national memory. Fast forward to today, and we're still grappling with these issues. Police shooting unarmed so-called black people in the back, police lying on so-called black people in police reports, police planting evidence and drug on black brothers. Modern protests against police violence and calls for reform echo the struggles of the past. The demand for accountability and change is louder than ever. But it's not all bleaks. There are efforts to bridge the gap between the police and the communities they serve. Community policing initiatives aim to build trust and cooperation, showing that positive change is possible. Police departments across the country are reevaluating their training programs and policies to crack harder down on the so-called black communities. There's a growing recognition that to serve and protect, the police must also understand and respect the communities they work in. So while the journey from watchmen to warriors has been complex and often troubled, there's hope for a future where the police and the people they serve can work together in harmony. It's a long road, but with continued effort and dialogue, we can move towards a more tighter police state, a just and equitable society, a new world order. The police have their own order to maintain order of the British Crown, which is ran by Knights of Templar, which connects with the clan. That's why their leader is called a Grand Wizard. The Grand Wizard, sometimes called the Imperial Wizard or National Director, is the national leader of several different Ku Klux Klan organizations in the United States and abroad. The title Grand Wizard was used by the first Klan, which was founded in 1865, and which existed during the Reconstruction era until 1872. The title was chosen because General Forrest had been known as the Wizard of the Saddle during the Civil War. The FOP, or Fraternal Order of Police, is the world's largest organization of sworn law enforcement officers. It's a fraternal organization dedicated to the welfare of law enforcement officers and the communities they serve. The FOP has over 377,000 members in over 2,200 lodges. What they do, advocate for law enforcement. The FOP advocates for the rights and safety of its members and the communities they serve. They provide various services and benefits to members, including legislative support, legal defense, and more. The FOP actively fosters collaboration with communities and strives to build a stronger, safer environment, education, and training. The FOP provides resources for education, training, and information for its members. National Grand Lodge, the national structure of the FOP, with headquarters in Nashville, Tennessee, state-level organizations that oversee local lodges, local chapters of the FOP where members organize and participate. Membership is open to any regularly appointed and full-time employed law enforcement officer. Retired officers. Local lodges often have provisions for retired law enforcement officers. The FOP has a long history dating back to its founding in 1915. They are committed to improving the working conditions of law enforcement officers and the safety of those they serve. The FOP is a strong voice for law enforcement, advocating for its members and the communities they serve. The New York City Police Department, NYPD, originates in the government of New York City attempts to control rising crime in early to mid-19th century New York City. The city's reforms created a full-time professional police force modeled upon London's Metropolitan Police, itself only formed in 1829. Established in 1845, the municipal police replaced the inadequate night watch system which had been in place since the 17th century, when the city was founded by the Dutch as New Amsterdam. The 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution reserves powers not delegated to the federal government to the states or the people. This includes the states' inherent police power, which is their authority to regulate for the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of their citizens. This police power allows states to enact laws related to public health, safety, and local governance, including creating and enforcing laws and regulations. The 10th Amendment also limits the federal government's ability to regulate or command state governments to adopt policies or enforce federal laws. The 10th Amendment essentially affirms that states retain a broad range of powers that are not specifically granted to the federal government in the Constitution. This includes the power to regulate within their borders to protect the well-being of their residents. Examples of state police powers. This includes enacting laws related to public health, safety, local government, and even agricultural production. Limits on federal overreach. The 10th Amendment is often used as a basis for challenging federal laws that are perceived as infringing on state authority or intruding into areas traditionally reserved for state governments. The Supreme Court has frequently addressed cases involving the balance between state police powers and federal constitutional requirements. For example, while states have broad police powers, they must still abide by the Bill of Rights and other constitutional protections. The federal government does not have an inherent and general police power in the way states do. However, through powers like taxing, spending, and regulating interstate commerce, the federal government can exercise functions that may be considered similar to a police power in certain areas. In 1857, the municipal police were tumultuously replaced by the Metropolitan Police, which consolidated other local police departments. Now, we can't talk about American policing without talking about race. It's a conversation that is deeply intertwined with the history of this country. From the very beginning, race has played a pivotal role in shaping the structures and systems that govern us. It's baked into the system's DNA. The legacy of racial control and oppression is not just a footnote in history, it's a foundational element that continues to influence modern policing practices. See, before there were police departments as we know them, there were slave patrols. The first formalized slave patrols were established in South Carolina in 1704 as a response to fears of slave uprisings. These patrols were designed to control enslaved people's movements, enforce slave codes, and deter rebellions. These patrols were established all over in the early 1700s in the southern United States, and their primary function was to maintain the economic order and racial hierarchy of the time. These weren't your friendly neighborhood watchmen. They were armed men, often on horseback, who roamed the countryside with the explicit purpose of enforcing the laws of slavery. Their job was to control, brutalize, and terrorize enslaved people. They were authorized to use extreme violence to capture runaway slaves, deter revolts, and maintain the status quo of white supremacy. These patrols were the first line of defense for a system built on white supremacy. They were a crucial part of the machinery that kept the institution of slavery running smoothly. They enforced fugitive slave laws, put down rebellions, and generally made life a living hell for so-called black people. The fear and violence they instilled were meant to crush any hope of freedom or resistance. And here's the kicker: these patrols laid the groundwork for modern policing in the South. Think about that. The very institutions that were designed to oppress and control black people evolved into the police departments we know today. The Black Christian Code are a part of your problem as so-called black people. So-called African Americans, after the rebranding, found themselves in a world that was hostile at best. Harnessing their culture, they worked to secure freedom and justice. Many founded their own Christian churches as a cover, which provided a refuge for enslaved and free so-called black community members facing discriminatory laws in both the North and the South. Others pulled from Western African indigenous faith systems as well as African traditions of Islam and Christianity. Each religion helped build an identity beyond slavery and discrimination and acted as a form of resistance to enslavement. They had never heard of Islam, the religion, and Christianity over here at the North Gate until after 1492. The color of law. The term color of law does not refer to a literal color. It's a legal phrase referring to the appearance of lawful authority or a legal right that may not exist, often used to describe the abuse of power by government officials under the guise of state action. It signifies that an action, even if unlawful, is done while the official is purporting to act in their official capacity. In essence, color of law means acts done by government officials, especially law enforcement, while they are perceived to be exercising their official duties. Acts done beyond the bounds of an official's lawful authority, but while the official is pretending to act in their official duties. Actions that are considered to be the action of the state, even if they are not directly authorized by law. Examples of actions under the color of law: police officers using excessive force during an arrest, even if the arrest itself is lawful; judges imposing an illegal sentence, even if they are acting within their jurisdiction; prison guards using excessive force against an inmate, even if they are acting within the prison system; a government official using their position to discriminate against someone. The term color of law is important because it creates a basis for civil rights lawsuits against government officials for their actions, helps to prevent the abuse of power by government officials, ensures that government officials are held accountable for their actions even if they are not directly authorized by law. Police operate under color of law when they are acting in their official capacity, even if they are exceeding their lawful authority. This means that even if an officer is abusing their power or committing an unlawful act while purporting to act in their official duties, they are still considered to be acting under color of law. Under color of law refers to actions taken by state actors, like police, that are purportedly based on a legal right or statute, but are in reality a violation of someone's legal rights. This includes situations where police officers use excessive force, engage in sexual assault, make false arrests, or fabricate evidence while acting in their official capacity. Acting under color of law can lead to criminal charges such as under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, which prohibits depriving someone of their constitutional rights while acting under the color of law. Understanding this concept is crucial for ensuring accountability and protecting individual rights from abuse of power by law enforcement. Even when off-duty, an officer may still be considered to be acting under color of law if they identify themselves as a police officer and use their authority to carry out law enforcement functions. Excessive force, unlawful detentions, sexual misconduct, and fabrication of evidence are all examples of violations that can occur while acting under color of state law. The very foundations of law enforcement were built on racial oppression. This legacy has had a lasting impact on how policing is conducted and perceived, particularly in so-called black communities. After the Civil War, slavery was abolished, but the mentality of slave patrols lingered. The end of slavery didn't mean the end of racial control. Instead, new systems and laws were put in place to continue the subjugation of so-called black people. Jim Crow laws took hold. And guess who was tasked with enforcing these new tools of segregation? Yep, the police. They became the enforcers of a new racial order, ensuring that so-called black people remained second-class citizens. So from the jump, so-called black communities have had a very different relationship with law enforcement than so-called white communities. This historical context is crucial for understanding the deep-seated mistrust and tension that exists today. The legacy of slave patrols is not just a relic of the past, it's a living, breathing part of our present reality. Jim Crow wasn't just about separate water fountains and bus seats. It was about maintaining white power through any means necessary. And the police were key enforcers of this brutal system. They enforced segregation laws, often with violence. They turned a blind eye to lynchings and other forms of racial terror. But it wasn't just the police. What is police brutal? Police brutality refers to the excessive and unwarranted use of force by law enforcement against an individual or a group. It's a form of police misconduct that violates civil rights and can include acts like beatings, racial abuse, unlawful killings, torture, and the indiscriminate use of riot control agents. Police brutality involves using more force than is necessary or reasonable in a given situation. It also refers to the use of force when it's not warranted or legally permissible. Examples include beatings, asphyxiation, improper takedowns, racially motivated violence, and unwarranted use of tasers. Police brutality can lead to serious injuries, trauma, and even death for victims, according to Amnesty International. It can also erode trust in law enforcement and create a climate of fear in communities. Factors contributing to police brutality include issues like inadequate training, the insular culture of police departments, and the militarization of police forces. Police brutality disproportionately affects marginalized communities, leading to increased rates of mistrust and anxiety. Police brutality refers to the excessive and unwarranted use of force by law enforcement, potentially involving verbal attacks, psychological intimidation, or physical violence. International law, through human rights treaties and other mechanisms, prohibits police brutality and the excessive use of force. requiring that force be used only when strictly necessary and proportional to the threat. Police brutality also encompasses verbal attacks and psychological intimidation that go beyond what is necessary for the situation. International law and police brutality. International human rights law, particularly the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, explicitly prohibits the use of excessive force and other forms of police abuse. International law requires that force used by law enforcement officials be proportionate to the threat and that other de-escalation methods have been exhausted. The UN Code of Conduct for Law Enforcement Officials and other instruments. These documents outline standards for law enforcement, emphasizing the need to respect human rights and avoid excessive force. International law also emphasizes the need for accountability for police misconduct, including the excessive use of force. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the Declaration on the Protection of All Persons from being subjected to torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, among others, are relevant to this issue. Groups like the Ku Klux Klan, often operating with impunity, terrorized black communities. And here's the thing, sometimes the lines between the Klan and the police were blurred. Some officers were Klan members. Others looked the other way when the Klan committed acts of violence. This created a deep and understandable mistrust of law enforcement in black communities, a mistrust that persists to this day. The arsenal of democracy, how the military equipped the police. Fast forward to the 20th century. America's appetite for war didn't disappear after World War II. In fact, it only seemed to grow stronger. We had the Cold War, the war on drugs, the war on terror. Each of these conflicts brought its own set of challenges and required a massive number of resources, and each conflict had a profound impact on policing back home. The lines between military and police began to blur. See, after these wars, the military had a lot of surplus equipment. We're talking about billions of dollars worth of gear. Tanks, armored vehicles, grenades, you name it. This equipment was designed for battlefields, not city streets. And what do you do with all that gear? You can't just let it sit and gather dust. Well, some bright spark in the government thought, hey, let's give it to the police. Enter the 1033 program. This was a game changer. This program, launched in 1997, allowed the Pentagon to transfer surplus military equipment to local police departments, often at little to no cost. It was like Christmas for police departments across the country. The idea was to help police fight the war on drugs, which, spoiler alert, was a colossal failure. Because the people who started the war on drugs were bringing the drugs in the whole time. The drugs kept coming, but now the police were armed to the teeth. But that didn't stop the flow of military hardware to local police departments. In fact, it only increased over time. Now you might be thinking, what do the police need grenades for? Good question. It's not like they're dealing with enemy combatants, but that's the thing. This wasn't just about practical needs, it was about something much deeper. It was about sending a message of power, of force, of we're not afraid to use this. It was a show of strength. This was meant to deter crime, but it also had other effects. And who do you think that message was sent to? It wasn't just the criminals, it was sent to the entire community. It was a way to assert control, to show who was in charge. This shift in policing tactics had a significant impact on community relations. The presence of military-grade equipment made many people feel like they were living in a war zone. Community leaders and activists began to question the necessity and appropriateness of such equipment. They argued that it created an atmosphere of fear and mistrust. On the other hand, some argued that this equipment was necessary to protect officers and ensure public safety. They pointed to instances where such gear had been used to defuse dangerous situations. The debate continues to this day. But one thing is clear, the militarization of the police has fundamentally changed the way law enforcement operates in America. Whether for better or worse, the lines between military and police have blurred. And as long as the 1033 program exists, that line will continue to blur. So the next time you see a police officer in military gear, remember the history behind it. It's not just about fighting crime, it's about a legacy of conflict and a message of power. And as we move forward, it's crucial to ask ourselves, is this the kind of policing we want? Is this the message we want to send to our communities? The answers to these questions will shape the future of law enforcement in America, and it's up to us to decide what that future will look like. From beat cops to SWAT teams, the rise of paramilitary policing. Remember the friendly neighborhood watchman? Well, he's been replaced by a soldier in a police uniform. The rise of SWAT teams is a prime example of this militarization. SWAT teams were initially created to deal with high-risk situations like hostage standoffs or active shooters, but over the years their use has expanded dramatically. Drug raids, warrant executions, even routine patrols. SWAT teams are now deployed for a wide range of situations, often with little oversight or accountability. And this militarized approach has had deadly consequences, particularly in communities of color. The names of Breonna Taylor, Philando Castile, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, and countless others are a tragic testament to this. A foreign occupying police force refers to a police force deployed by a foreign government to enforce laws in a territory they have occupied, often following military conquest or surrender. This force typically operates under the authority of the occupying power and is tasked with maintaining order, security, and potentially administering the occupied territory. The term occupying power refers to a state that has legally acquired the right to administer and implement its policies in a territory it has occupied through military conquest or surrender. The police force would be responsible for maintaining law and order, policing the civilian population, and carrying out tasks assigned by the occupying power. The laws of occupation are governed by international law, including the Geneva Conventions and the Hague Regulations, which outline the rights and responsibilities of both the occupying power and the local population. Historically, this has been seen in cases like the occupation of Poland by Nazi Germany during World War II, where the Ordnungspolizei was tasked with policing the civilian population in occupied territories. While less common in modern times, foreign police forces may still be deployed in certain situations, such as in areas with ongoing conflicts or where a state's internal law enforcement is unable to maintain order. In general, a sheriff is considered the top law enforcement officer in a county, while city police officers and state troopers have jurisdiction within specific municipalities or statewide, respectively. Therefore, the sheriff's authority typically extends beyond that of a city police officer or a state trooper within the same county. The primary difference between a sheriff and a police officer lies in their jurisdiction and duties. Sheriffs, typically elected county officials, have jurisdiction over the entire county, including unincorporated areas and unincorporated cities. Police officers, on the other hand, are employed by municipalities and operate within city limits. Sheriffs have jurisdiction over all unincorporated areas of the county, as well as any municipalities within the county that don't have their own police department. Police departments have jurisdiction within the specific city or town they serve. Responsibilities. While there can be overlap in responsibilities, police departments often focus on urban crime, while sheriff's offices may also handle duties like traffic control, animal control, and courthouse security. State and federal agencies. Beyond sheriffs and police, state and federal law enforcement agencies exist to address issues that span multiple jurisdictions or require specialized expertise, such as the FBI or DEA. A sheriff's officer can arrest an FBI, CIA, DEA agent if they believe the agent has committed a crime that violates state or local law. In most jurisdictions in the United States, sheriffs are elected while police chiefs are generally appointed. Sheriffs are the chief law enforcement officers of a county, and they are accountable to the public through elections. Police chiefs, on the other hand, oversee city or municipal police departments and are typically appointed by a mayor, city council, or other local officials. FBI and police can't arrest you. This is why they always bring the sheriffs. Sheriffs are the only real lawman. Every other law beside U.S. Marshal are foreign agencies. Local and state law enforcement officers have the authority to arrest individuals for violations of state and local laws within their jurisdiction. FBI agents are subject to the same laws as any other individual, including local and state laws. If a local police officer suspects an FBI agent of committing a crime, they should typically notify their supervisors, who will then contact the FBI. The FBI would conduct an internal investigation to determine if the agent violated any laws or regulations. Depending on the outcome of the FBI investigation, the agent could be arrested by the FBI or by local authorities. The American system of police policy is characterized by a decentralized structure, with law enforcement primarily managed at the state and local levels. This means there's a wide variety of policies and practices across different jurisdictions, influenced by local contexts and needs. Key areas of police policy include use of force, community policing, and accountability measures. Key aspects of the American system of police policy. Unlike many other countries, the U.S. doesn't have a single, unified national police force. Law enforcement is primarily the responsibility of state and local agencies, including police departments, sheriff's offices, and state troopers. This decentralization results in a wide range of policies and practices across different jurisdictions. For example, use of force policies, community policing strategies, and accountability measures can differ significantly from one city or county to another. Policing policies are often shaped by the specific characteristics of the communities they serve, including demographics, crime rates, and socioeconomic factors. A major area of policy focus is the use of force by law enforcement officers. Policies often outline the appropriate levels of force in various situations, including de-escalation tactics and the use of deadly force. Many departments are adopting community policing strategies which emphasize building trust and relationships between officers and the communities they serve. This often involves strategies like foot patrols, community meetings, and partnerships with local organizations. Policies related to accountability are crucial for ensuring that law enforcement officers are held responsible for their actions. This can include policies on the use of force, citizen complaints, and internal investigations. The field of policing is constantly evolving, with new research and approaches being developed and implemented. This includes topics like predictive policing, body-worn cameras, and alternative responses to mental health crises. International law limits the authority of foreign police officers within a country's territory, particularly concerning arrest and detention. Diplomatic immunity protects foreign diplomats and consular officials from local jurisdiction, meaning they cannot be arrested or prosecuted for criminal offenses. However, foreign police officers are generally not considered diplomats or consular officials and do not typically enjoy the same level of immunity. Diplomats and consular officials are granted significant legal protections under international law, including immunity from local jurisdiction. This means they cannot be arrested or detained, and they are generally exempt from lawsuits. While foreign police officers may be involved in law enforcement cooperation, they are generally not authorized to make arrests or detain individuals within the host country's territory. Their actions are typically limited to assisting local authorities in gathering information. There are exceptions to the general rule, such as when exigent circumstances arise, for example, an imminent threat to life or safety, or when authorized by the host country's government. If foreign police officers acting within a host country violate international law or commit crimes, the state they represent is responsible for addressing those violations. International organizations like Interpol facilitate cooperation between different countries' law enforcement agencies. However, Interpol cannot compel arrests. Each country decides what value it gives to Interpol notices and the authority of its police to act. In essence, international law seeks to balance the need for international cooperation in law enforcement with the sovereignty of individual states and the protection of individuals from arbitrary arrest or detention. While some perceive American police as acting like an occupying army due to the increased militarization and heavy-handed tactics used in some situations, the primary role of law enforcement in the U.S. is to maintain order and enforce the law, not to dominate or control a population like an occupying force. The military and police have distinct roles, with the military focused on national defense and the police on domestic law enforcement. The police have increasingly adopted military equipment and tactics, including armored vehicles, rifles, and riot gear, which can create a sense of intimidation and reinforce a perception of an occupying force. Military-style tactics. Some police departments have adopted military-style operational structures and training, including using military-style tactics like raids and overwhelming force, which can lead to a perception of an occupying force. The U.S. military and police have distinct roles. The military is responsible for defending the nation against foreign threats, while the police are responsible for maintaining order and enforcing the law within the country. Posse Comitatus Act. The Posse Comitatus Act limits the use of military personnel in domestic law enforcement, aiming to prevent the military from being used as a police force. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more deep dives into important topics. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.